We continue to put hazardous waste from the phosphate fertilizer industry into our clean water. And any MP that hears this information, if they don't act on this, then for God's sake, get rid of them.
In 1991, the Australian National Health and Medical Research Council acknowledged the many reports from citizens claiming to be sensitive to fluoridated water. Subsequently, they recommended that proper, well-controlled scientific testing be conducted to resolve this matter. In 2006, the US National Research Council also called for rigorous scientific studies. But health authorities in all fluoridating countries have ignored these calls, leaving potential sufferers in the dark.
Any toxic substance has a normal distribution curve of response. It's a bell-shaped curve. One end of the bell-shaped curve, you expect to find a few people that are very resistant to a toxic substance. And at the other end of the bell-shaped curve, you expect a few percent, maybe 1 or 2%, to be very sensitive to the toxic substance. And most people are somewhere in the middle, the average response. So the notion that there's a small percentage of the public that is very sensitive to fluoride is absolutely what you would expect. But it's not being investigated in Australia.
On the subject of fluoride testing, there seems to be almost no testing available at pathology labs or hospitals for a doctor who suspects that a patient suffers fluoride-related illness, or for a sufferer who wants their experience with fluoride tested and confirmed. I think the problem is many-fold. Doctors don't request fluoride testing because it's missing from their education and their ongoing professional development. Laboratories don't do it because they don't currently have an easy-to-interpret testing protocol. But above all, in my experience, state health departments and national bodies like the National Health and Medical Research Council don't want any clinical testing for fluoride developed.
What sort of testing is it that we need, David?
We need suitable testing for those many patients who suffer painful symptoms that they have discovered they can get free from if they rigorously avoid all fluoridated tap water and other fluoride products for a period of time, of days or sometimes weeks. In 1991, the NHMRC report on water fluoridation stated that there were many such people. It said, and I quote, "These claims are being made with sufficient frequency to justify well-designed studies which can properly control for subject and observer bias." End of quote.
The chemicals used are not pharmaceutical grade. This is one of the things which is brought out beautifully in this Australian video called Fire Water. It's confirmed over and over again that the chemicals used are not the pharmaceutical grade chemicals that they put in dental products, but it's the hazardous waste from the phosphate fertilizer industry. Now, let me give a few more details of this. There's no question about that, by the way, but most dentists won't believe you when you tell them that, okay? This is the process. When you mine phosphate rock, and phosphate rock is largely insoluble in water. So to make it into fertilizer, you've got to make it soluble, and the way we do that is to heat it up with sulfuric acid. And when you do that, you drive off two very toxic gases, hydrogen fluoride and silicon tetrafluoride. And for about 100 years, these very toxic gases were decimating the local environment, the local vegetation, including the citrus groves in Florida, and crippling cattle. And after this had gone on for 100 years, we're slow learners, they said, oops, maybe we ought to have a scrubber on here. So they put a scrubber, a wet scrubber. It's a spray of water. And that spray of water converts the hydrogen fluoride and silicon tetrafluoride gases into a solution called hexafluorosilicic acid, which is contaminated with all kinds of other toxic metals and even radioactive isotopes, because the same ore that is mined for phosphate fertilizer is also mined for uranium. So all this junk is in there.
Hello, my name is Marilyn and welcome to my story. In July 2009, Barwon Water, on behalf of the Victorian Government, fluoridated Geelong's water supply. And in July 2009, I was forced to purchase chemical-free and fluoride-free water because I am chemically sensitive. In Queensland, the councils now have got the option to take out the fluoride from the water, and a lot of them are starting to do that. And it's not about politics, but about the health of people. And we're not walking sets of teeth, you know, we are human tissue and we've got our organs, and we need to be looked after, and we need good, safe water to shower and to drink.
She has been getting illness from fluoridated water since living in Melbourne, and her mother brought her back to Geelong to live because the water was making her sick in Melbourne. As a child she got sick from fluoride tablets, and she was the one to detect that. When they fluoridated Melbourne in 1977, the illnesses, all the symptoms started again, replicating what she got from fluoride tablets, and her mother then brought her to live in Geelong, and she was much better until, of course, Geelong water was fluoridated in 2009, where all her symptoms occurred again.
It's about our health, and the politicians, hello, even the health ministers, they aren't doctors, so how can they tell us what should be in our water and what we should be eating and drinking, etc.? We should be looked after, and we're not being looked after.
This patient stayed away from fluoridated water as much as possible, but complete avoidance of fluoride is almost impossible, as fluoride is now into the food chain, breads, biscuits, fruits grown on fluoridated water. You'll all, if you're sensitive to fluoride, then patients will often show reactions to those food compounds. So she has tried to avoid eating foods that have been grown with fluoridated water, prepared with fluoridated water. and that even goes as far as not being able to wash in the fluoridated water. That brings on just a more minor version of the same symptoms that my patients get from fluoridated water if they drink it.
Politicians have not got the right to mass medicate us without a prescription. If I want a prescription, I go to my doctor, and then I will Google that prescription and find out more about it and see what my doctor wants me to take. But hello, what we've got in our water, we've got no damn choice, and it's not fair. Do I have to move overseas where it's safer and where they haven't got it? 97% of the world is unfluoridated. Hello, what are we? The last 3%. In February 2011, I actually stopped showering. I just couldn't go there anymore. I was becoming too unwell. So I had to think of my own health.
Philip, in your understanding, how long do you know that this particular patient has had no contact with fluoridated water in terms of showering or washing hands?
Well, after she was coming to the clinic, she was getting illness, stomach pains, which meant that her practitioner were trying to work out how to trigger what was causing it. And even though she was avoiding the fluoridated water in terms of drinking it, she was still washing it, she was still eating vegetables that were sprayed, the moisturisers in the supermarket, and she was getting severely ill with that. So she then stopped showering in it and washing her hands in it, and that brought about a significant improvement.
I haven't showered for 2 years. I can't even bathe or anything in the water. It just makes me sick. I just avoid it, and I just go and buy my water and have a sponge wash.
How often do you have a sponge bath?
Once a fortnight. I just can't afford to buy the water to do it on a more regular basis because I'm just using the water for every other day use, and it gets expensive.
We're in the bathroom with Marilyn, and she is preparing her sponge bath that she has about each fortnight. Tell me what sort of water you use, Marilyn.
I buy the water from the supermarket because it's fluoride free and not as many chemicals, cocktails in it. It costs me anything between $4 and $6, and I can only afford to do it once a fortnight. So this is as good as it gets, and this is the water I rinse off with. That's for my feet, that's for my sponge thingy, and that's as good as it gets. And this is what I do, and I sit on my bath board and have my sponge wash. I'm in survival mode, and I do need fresh potable water, and Barwon Water is not supplying that to me. So therefore I have been forced to purchase chemical and fluoride-free water from the supermarkets. Went into a fruit and veggie shop and loaded up my basket, turned round, and here they are with a hose spraying the lettuces and all the greenery to make it look nice and fresh and as if it's just been picked. Like, hello, you don't need to do that. I don't need extra fluoride in my food. It's already got it in it. It makes me sick. So that's why I'm growing my own food. I've been forced into that situation, and people just don't realise what they're doing. In the supermarkets, they do it late at night or early in the morning, so people don't see them doing it. It's totally unnecessary. I grow my own veggies and my own fruit. I've increased my fruit production. I've got rhubarb and strawberries growing now. I've got a couple of raised beds happening at home. I've got fruit trees. At least it's fluoride free, and I'm sourcing more organic foods, but again, has it had tap water on it? You just don't know. It's been in the too hard basket. This year is going to be the year that I'm going to try and get my food source correct, and I won't get sick. Well, in June 2012, I received a letter from Barwon Water threatening to reduce the water flow on my property. And in July 2012, they actually did. I didn't contact them, mainly because I've had phone conversations with them. They know my situation, and so do Australian Receivables Limited. And each letter I receive, they say that we have not received communication from you. Like, how many letters do I have to write? How many letters does it take to send to a semi-government body, etc., or whatever? Get it into their thick heads. Hello? I haven't got the money to pay my water rates because I'm forced to buy chemical, fluoride-free water, and my water debt is larger than what I owe them. I only feel safe and in control when I'm in my own home and in my own backyard. At least I know that I've got safe water that I can use there, and I can wash my hands and do what I want when I want to under my own conditions. And while I'm at home, it's amazing the people that have been coming to me and stories that I hear about skin conditions, skin problems in Geelong, eczema, dermatitis, psoriasis, that's what they're all calling it. But hello, I'll ask the question, when does it happen? After I've had a shower, after I've had a bath, after I've washed my hands. And the more I do these things, it just gets worse, and it's happening a lot to young children. And it just makes me want to cry. You know, it's just so sad that these children and adults, it's all happening to them. And the doctors, they just don't really want to know about it. They just call it eczema, dermatitis, psoriasis. In January 2013, it comes around to them putting the caveat on my property, which is going to, you know, for the debt that I owe them, which is only $1,250, and it's going to make me homeless. And I've had to pay out $4,500 since July 2009 to this very day for the chemical fluoride-free water. And this has put me in massive debt, not just with Barwon Water, but with everybody else. I cannot afford to pay my bills because I'm having to purchase water. I'd like the people in Geelong to wake up and really look at what's in their water. And if I'd had clean, good quality water, I would not have to do this. And my water that comes through the taps is not chemical free. I only use it for my toilet, minimal washing machine. My washing machine doesn't use much water. It's got very good water energy saving mechanisms, and I use minimal water to wash dishes. I'd love to live overseas because at least I could eat and go out to a restaurant and have a meal whenever I want to, shower whenever I want to, wash my hands whenever I want to, without getting sick. I cannot go out to a restaurant with my friends and have a meal, or my family. I can't take a packed lunch to a restaurant, they won't let me in. I can't even shower safely. What do? Move overseas? The main debt with Barwon Water is the sewage transfer of the water to my property. And hello, I'm not really using a lot of it. The water volume that I have, it's like on the bill, you know how you've got the numbers? Mine's an 8 each quarter. And it only comes to about $40. I love my cat. She means a lot to me, and I like to extend her life because she's smaller than me, and so her organs are going to be more affected by this water that we're being forced to drink than what it affects me. My water debt per month is in the vicinity of $150 to $180. Do you think it's fair that I have to pay for water that I do not personally use because I cannot have the water touch my skin, or I cannot ingest it? If it touches my skin, it burns, and I have a skin condition. And if I ingest it, it makes me very unwell.
This is Marilyn's tummy in healthy mode. She's had permanent bloating since living in Melbourne. If she drinks tap water, her stomach bloats up further with severe pain and discomfort until she looks like she's 9 months pregnant. Hi Di, thank you so much for taking the time to come to this project and give your experience and knowledge.
My absolute pleasure, Jane. Thank you so much.
Is there independent laboratories?
Absolutely not. Every test you have, like these independent laboratories, they do, I won't show you the name, but there's loads and loads and loads of different tests that they do on us, but anything to do with fluoride is sent to the health departments themselves, the very people who are forcing this chronic poisoning of us all through this fluoride. That is the same with animals as well. Of course, our vets here in Australia, they're not trained, as the doctors aren't trained. They're, to be honest, clueless about the damage that fluoride, fluorosilicic acid, does to both animals and humans. They just have no knowledge at all.
How hard is it for an individual to get tested in this country?
It seems to be very hard because even if you go to the trouble of getting urine and blood tests, they're not easy to interpret unless you do a whole series of them and examine all the other fluoride intakes for that person. So the proper sort of clinical testing for symptoms resulting from fluoridated water is pretty hard to get any hospital or any clinic to conduct it.
And getting the testing done, I had to sort of demand that it be done, but it was very, very difficult. And the laboratories that he sent the samples to, as I said earlier, do not do the testing and results. They're all sent to Queensland Health, the ones who put the poison in the water in the first place, fluoride.
So how difficult was it to get tests analysed once you'd actually had the tests done?
Very good question, because I couldn't find anybody at all to analyse the results.
And then there's our wildlife. What's happened to our kangaroos, like down at Portland? Their bones are so, they're crippled, they're not living nearly as long as a healthy life as what they should be. Like, where does this begin? Where does it finish? It's just not right. You know, we're one of the last countries in the world to have fluoride in our water. How archaic and backward is that?
Now, everyone, so many of you with your beautiful pets may not make a connection between the fluoride contamination of our water and food supplies and sickness and illness in your pets. This must be addressed and care for our beautiful pets.
My name is Darryl Turner and I'm 58 years old. I've lived in South Australia for 58 years and I've got skeletal fluorosis. I've sent information over to India to Professor A.K. Sushila, who treats people over there for skeletal fluorosis and fluoride poisoning. And she says I have skeletal fluorosis. I'm a patient of skeletal fluorosis.
Very serious is the fact that whilst your engineers can control the concentration at the public waterworks where the fluoride is put in, what they can't do is you can't control the dose that people get at the tap, because you can't control how much water they drink. And you can't control how much fluoride they're getting from other sources, like toothpaste. In fact, when I was in Western Australia just a week or so ago, I met somebody in the mining industry, and they told me that miners in Western Australia can drink between 10 and 12 litres of water a day. Those miners, I tell you right now, are wrecking their bones, based upon what we know from India and China. They are wrecking their bones, and nobody's warning them if they're using fluoridated water. So you can't control the dose.
Ladies and gentlemen, 1 milligram per litre of water, fluoride in the water, 2 milligrams per 2 litres of water, 3 milligrams per 3 litres of water. What does that say? Filtered water. My goodness me. Unbelievable. They're looking after people down here at Glenelg. Why not the rest of Adelaide? Yeah, I used to work in aluminium foundries as a die caster, and we used sodium fluoride every day as a flux for the aluminium die casting process, which helps with the structure of the aluminium when it's flowing in the die to make up mag wheels and other car components. And this is used everywhere in Australia, or over the world in fact, as the process of aluminium die casting. Not to mention it's used in iron castings as well. I've never ever been told by any government agencies or even my employer about the toxicity of working with fluoride, except for my leading hand the first day I ever used sodium fluoride, and he told me, be careful, that stuff, it's poison. I was working with sodium fluoride for 15 years, and I was inhaling it, settling on my arms, on my clothing, and I'd be taking it home as well, because my wife would be washing it in the wash clothes, and she'd be exposed to it as well, along with my children. And not to mention, it was in the water supply as well. So we were ingesting it, soaking in it, and eating it through the food supply. I was never told that the sodium fluoride was poisonous, and I approached Work SA, Safe Work SA, and for any information they had considering fluoride poisoning in the environment at work, and they sent me some flyers which has fluoride exposure on it, and it says fluorides are present in some electrodes and in flux. Long-term exposure to very high concentrations may cause bone changes and joint deterioration. Mild or excessive exposure may have chronic effects such as pulmonary edema and skin rashes.
Fluoride in the bone. The first symptoms of fluoride's poisoning of the bone, well established in India and China, are stiffness of joints. Stiffness of joints, and then pains in the joints and pains in the bone, and pains in the muscles. And we now have 1 in 3 Americans with arthritis, and if you ask your doctor, Doc, what causes arthritis? They say, we don't really know, but we think it's got something to do with aging. And what does aging have to do with in Australia? It may have something to do with how many years you've spent drinking fluoridated water. But again, no one's investigating a possible connection with arthritis and fluoridation. Even though, incidentally, the National Health and Medical Research Council in 1991 recommended that health agencies in Australia measure fluoride levels in the bone so that they could look at a possible relationship with various bone diseases, osteoporosis, arthritis, and bone fractures. Haven't done it in 20 years.
I've had x-rays and on my spine, my arms, my legs, my feet, or on my feet, and there's bone spurs everywhere. I have an x-ray here showing that I have skeletal fluorosis, and the skeletal fluorosis you can see in the mid-arm, forearm. If you look at the picture, you can see that the membrane's been calcified. Professor A.K. Sheila says that if you have this sort of affliction in your bones, you have skeletal fluorosis.
I think it's terribly hard for a GP who comes across a patient who knows that they're being harmed by fluoridated water and who's worked it out for themselves by going on and off of the water. They look around and they can't find any easily available testing to do. And if they talk to their medical association, they'll get told, don't look any further into this. So it's awfully hard on the individual concerned doctor. And we need government health departments and the NHMRC to educate doctors on it and to get the testing sorted out and available for everybody.
Who regulates and approves the use of fluoride chemicals in Australian water supplies? Who tests the impact of fluoridated water upon Australian consumers? Trying to untangle this question leads you into a maze of, well, what in ordinary language we call passing the buck. The drinking water guidelines developed by NHMRC specify the 3 fluoride compounds that can be used. They also specify the upper concentration limit of 1.5 milligram per litre. And about once a decade, the NHMRC conducts a review of some of the scientific literature on water fluoridation. But has the NHMRC ever conducted safety testing? Or efficacy testing on these fluoride compounds? No, never.
And then they say, oh, well, the NHMRC did a review in 2007. It's totally safe and effective. That is one of the worst reviews that have ever been done. They practically carbon copied the York review and dismissed the one study that has of real significance, which is the National Research Council's review, 500 pages, 1,100 references, and they dismissed that in one sentence on the basis that this review was done at 4 parts per million, and we in Australia fluoridate between 0.7 and 1.2. What does that tell you? It tells you that these very clever people that did this study do not know the difference between concentration and dose. So they don't even pass 101 in toxicology. Pathetic. Absolutely pathetic to say this was about 4 parts per million and we fluoridated 1 part per million, so we got this, like we had this margin of safety. Bullshit. Number one, the National Research Council looked at studies less than 4 parts per million. Some of them were actually less than 1 part per million. And chapter 2 of that research, the National Research Council report was an exposure analysis, which showed that there were subsets of the population exceeding the safe reference doses of the EPA by drinking fluoridated water at 1 part per million. So not only do they not know the difference in concentration and dose, they didn't even read the first chapter, or say the second chapter, because it clearly says that there are subsets of the population who are getting too much fluoride. Bottle-fed babies, diabetics, athletes who drink lots of water, and people with kidney dysfunction. So, again, hand-picked reviews.
Write in Letters to Citizens that it's not their role to do any such testing. The official promotional pamphlets and booklets of fluoridation make very strong therapeutic claims, so it might seem that the TGA, Therapeutic Goods Administration, should conduct drug testing and approval of fluoridation chemicals. The TGA's own description of its role includes, quote, essentially any product for which therapeutic claims are made must be listed, registered or included in the Australian Register of Therapeutic Goods, the ARTG, before it can be supplied in Australia, unquote. But neither fluoridated water nor the fluoridation chemicals are listed there. The TGA states that the Department of Health and Ageing can declare certain products not treated under the Therapeutic Goods Act 1989. Among those excluded products are oral hygiene products for the care of the teeth. But the term oral hygiene products brings to mind something you slosh around in your mouth and spit out. Tap water, on the other hand, with its fluoride, is eaten and drunk and enters the gut and bloodstream. TGA, or Minister for Health and Ageing, believe that these fluoride chemicals have such magical properties they can circulate around the body and do a neat little detour around every gland, organ or bone they encounter? Is that how they can classify them as purely oral hygiene products? Magical stuff indeed. Of course, most fluoridated tap water is not consumed by people and ends up in the environment. Perhaps other regulatory agencies should be involved in testing and monitoring. The Environmental Protection Authority, or EPA, in each state, for example. But the state EPAs quote various acts and regulations that mean they don't have to deal with anything to do with the flow of fluoridated water into the environment. The New South Wales EPA states that it's entirely the business of New South Wales under the Fluoridation of Public Water Supplies Act. EPA New South Wales does admit that the Environment Operations Act prohibits the disposal direct to waterways of fluoride waste streams that are generated from industrial or manufacturing processes. But apparently, when the same waste streams of industrial fluoride are deliberately added to the water supply under the Fluoridation Act, the EPA must look the other way when it enters various waterways and the general environment. If the fluorides added to water cannot be assessed by the TGA or EPA, then NHMRC? But no, for unspecified reasons, NHMRC officers state that the matter of examining these silica fluorides is outside the scope of NHMRC. Finally, if these various bureaucracies claim that regulations prevent them from assessing fluoride, and if the TGA claims that they do not class it as therapeutic goods, Perhaps fluoridated water is a beverage and comes under food standards. But the Food Standards Australia and New Zealand Agency has also conducted no safety testing on fluoridated water. This revolving door of offloading responsibility for fluoride is not unique to Australia. In the USA, an FDA has never assessed nor approved fluoride for addition to water for public health purposes. And the other agency, the National Health and Environment Effects Research Laboratory, also states it has no data on water fluoridation chemicals. The United States EPA, as we know, ordered the National Research Council to review fluoride in drinking water, and their excellent report of 2006 stated that hypersensitivity to fluoride needs to be examined properly. But that report largely gathers dust. Most countries of the world do not have the problem because they do not engage in water fluoridation. In Shakespeare's Hamlet, we hear the line, "Something is rotten in the state of Denmark." Something is certainly rotten in the agencies supposed to protect public health in countries like Australia that indulge in water fluoridation. Due to inaction by official agencies, only heaven really knows how many citizens suffer with fluoride toxicity, mostly unaware to the cause of their suffering.
The department I was in was the foundry. We sprayed sodium fluoride, and I showed him my elbows and the x-rays and stuff like that. And he said, and also material safety data sheets and all the other research that I have, I usually take and show people to prove, you know, what the toxicity of fluoride is. And he had a look and he was really surprised about the material safety data sheet, which had skull and crossbones on it, by the way, and had no research into the carcinogenicity, toxicology of it. And it's not available, not available, not available, not available. Why? If you don't look, you don't find. Doctors or GPs, they're not trained to look for chronic fluoride toxicity, and they have no idea about it. So it's about, conservatively, I reckon 1 to 100 doctors that you'll go through, and one of those doctors might just know a little bit about fluorosis. I've had x-rays done, more or less confirming that I have skeletal fluorosis, and I've had a urine test done, and there, even the results are loaded there because the ranges are too high. And internationally, they're a lot lower, so the doctors here would have no idea about you being poisoned because the ranges are skewed so that they don't worry about it. Or the normal reference range, normal range of fluoride in your urine should be between 0.2 to 3.2 milligrams per litre. According to Professor A.K. Susceptible, the normal urine fluoride accepted internationally is 0.1 to 1 milligram per litre. Australian standards, my fluoride urine levels are normal, in the normal reference range, but internationally I'm in the high normal. And Professor A.K. Susceptible made that point to me when I spoke to her over the phone.
Why is there such a difference? It's the same chemical.
They're trying to hide the results, manipulate the results.
Has the Department of Health in Australia done testing on fluoride levels amongst mass populations?
No.
Why not?
Because if you don't look, you don't find. Again. The fluoride exposure, you're getting it from the water, the food, and you're breathing it in, you're soaking it in when you're in the shower and baths. So you're getting it from everywhere. It's even at the beach, you're getting it through the seawater as well, because there's calcium fluoride in the water, the seawater, which is up to 1.5 milligrams per litre. Calcium fluoride's still poisonous and it's still doing damage over in India, People are being poisoned to the fact that they're deaf, dumb and blind, crippled. With the fluoride that's in our water supplies, hydrofluorosilicic acid, is not natural. It comes from the smokestack scrubbers of the fertiliser industry and the aluminium industry. So we're having arsenic, cadmium, uranium, you name it, we've got it in there, and it's not good for anybody. We discussed, my GP and I discussed having a bone biopsy, and I cringe because I do not like surgery one way or the other. And I said, did I have to go under a general anaesthetic? He said, no, we'll just do a local anaesthetic. And we both cringed at the same time as he said it. And he said, we could either take it out of your rib or one of your bones in your legs or your pelvis. It's your choice, he said. And I said, that's easy for you to say. And I said, no, we'll just defer that at the moment, and we'll see. I'll take one for the team when I need to. Yes, if they start looking at workers in the aluminium industry or any other industry that involves sodium fluoride or any fluorides, they'll just keep on finding problems. There are a plethora of symptoms, and if they start looking in these industries, then they'll have to start looking at the water fluoridation. If they do find something, then they'll have to admit fluoride is not safe and effective.
The evidence of benefit is very weak. This comes as a big shock to those who actually read the literature rather than just repeat the mantra, fluoridation is safe and effective, fluoridation is safe and effective, fluoridation is safe and effective. I'm now giving you the presentation of your typical representative of the American Australian Dental Association. Fluoridation is safe and effective, 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 safe and effective. This is a review done for the Ontario Health Agents Ministry from David Locker. The magnitude of fluoridation's effect, he means benefit, is not large in absolute terms, is often not statistically significant, and may not be of clinical significance. And yet we keep violating the individual's right to informed consent to medication, and we continue to take risks with our health, and we continue to put hazardous waste from the phosphate fertilizer industry into our clean water. As I say, this is an atrocity. And any MP that hears this information, as I said at the beginning of the program, if they don't act on this, then for God's sake, get rid of them. Because they are not trusted, they can't be trusted to run a bicycle shop, let alone a government.
Pretty disgusting with what they're putting in actually putting in the water supply, the hydrofluorosilicic acid. It's an industrial waste product, and there's no byproduct with it. It's industrial waste. It's poison. It kills people, and it's killing people today, but it's anonymously killing people. Doctors aren't trained to look for fluoride poisoning symptoms. Osteoarthritis, trembling in your hands, neuromuscular problems, food allergies, immune system problems, Alzheimer's disease.
Why Alzheimer's disease?
Sodium fluoride helps aluminium get through the blood-brain barrier, so anything that's containing aluminium with sodium fluoride in it, some of that aluminium will be going straight to the brain. When I had fluoride out of my system as much as possible, I have never felt that good in my life, ever, even when I was a child before fluoridation came along, because my mother smoked, and it's in cigarette smoke as well. I had a quick look at Dr. Bruce Spittle's book on the net. You can download it, and it talks about chronic fatigue syndrome and the chronic fluoride toxicity syndrome, just like Dr. Phyllis Mullinex says that the chronic fatigue syndrome symptoms are exactly the same as the chronic fluoride toxicity syndrome.
No studies have been investigating a possible relationship between fluoridated water and lowered IQ in children, arthritic symptoms in adults, underactive thyroid, increased bone fractures in children, earlier onset of puberty, Alzheimer's disease in adults, accumulation of fluoride in the pineal gland and lowered melatonin production, and the fact that there are many reports of citizens being sensitive to fluoride. None of these have been investigated scientifically in Canada. The science hasn't been done. If you don't look, you don't find.
In 2006, the National Research Council of the National Academy of Sciences in the United States, the nation's premier source of independent scientific expertise, noted, quote, "The endocrine system, apart from reproductive aspects, was not considered in detail in recent major reviews of the health effects of fluoride," end of quote. Then went on to list thyroid disease as one of the, quote, "major areas for investigation," unquote, for endocrine research. Did the Australian NHMRC investigate this matter thoroughly? You be the judge. Let's try an experiment. Open this document. Search for the word endocrine. We're using a Mac. Press Command F. Type endocrine. Highlight all. Phrase not found. That's right, it's not even mentioned once. Let's try these other searches. Pineal. Phrase not found. Digestive. Phrase not found. Kidney. We have one reference. Let's look at teeth. Highlight all. It seems we do have teeth.
There is nowhere that there's any kind of comprehensive testing of fluoridated urine. There's no one doing it. In fact, there's no comprehensive monitoring of the fluoride levels in our bones, in our blood, or in our urine. At this point, we should have millions of data points. We have practically none. But there's nothing to stop you asking, if you have a urine test, what the levels of fluoride are in your urine. When they did this with thousands of people in England, they were amazed at how high the levels were in the urine. And the rule of thumb is about 50% of the fluoride that you take in each day is excreted in the urine. And so you've got a rough measure of how much fluoride is coming into your body when you measure the fluoride in your urine. So yes, ask your doctor for that measure. But doctors, you see, this is one of the problems. When you put a subject off the radar screen, when you tell medical students there is no debate on fluoridation, it's perfectly safe, it's not toxic, no problem, then Doctors are not being trained to recognize the toxic effects of fluoride, especially for sensitive people. They're not being trained to recognize that we should be measuring the fluoride in the urine. It's very dangerous when politics interferes with science, especially science which is supposed to be determining health policy.
Shock any Australian taxpayer to know that despite this call from the NHMRC in 91, to this day in 2013, no such testing procedure or program has been implemented in Australia. The type of testing being called for is properly controlled challenge testing. That's double-blind challenge testing in a controlled environment. For most sufferers, it would take a full day to carry this out, or even more in some cases. The typical fluoride sensitivity reactions that we are talking about, that are reported in medical literature to occur, these include stomach and intestinal pains, joint pains and headaches, extreme fatigue that's not even relieved by sleep, skin rashes, and several other symptoms as well. In the United States, the National Research Council produced a report in 2006 on fluoride in drinking water, and this report again highlighted exactly this need to do testing across the nation for hypersensitivity reactions to fluoride. But then we come to 2007 in Australia. Our NHMRC produced another report on fluoridation, and this one entirely glossed over this whole issue. Not even any explanation for why there has never been any follow-up on their own 1991 recommendation for clinical testing to be developed.
The NHMRC's stated goal is working to build a healthy Australia. In the case of water fluoridation, it ostensibly aims to do so via systematic reviews. It does not seek to conduct original research of its own. Within its systematic reviews, the NHMRC may recommend further research. In 1991, the NHMRC did just that. The 1991 review drew attention to potential susceptibility, that is, what is now called hypersensitivity, to the effects of ingesting fluoridated water. In 1991, the NHMRC report stated, quote, "It is desirable to explore in a rigorous fashion the vague constellation of symptoms which are claimed to result from ingestion of fluoridated water can be shown to be reproducibly developed in these susceptible individuals. These claims are being made with sufficient frequency to justify well-designed studies which can properly control for subject and observer bias." NHMRC 1991, page 142, unquote. In the public interest of seeing how far the NHMRC has come toward doing the tests they recommended, I rang their office based in Sydney.
Good afternoon, NHMRC, Jessica speaking.
I just was looking through some journals and I found the NHMRC report on water fluoridation. I just wanted to have a little bit of information about why testing hasn't been done in Australia.
I'll just see if someone's available. Won't be a moment.
Thank you.
Hi, you there?
Yes.
Hello, sorry for the wait.
Yep.
The best person to speak to is actually out of the office today. I can give you the public health email address if you'd like. It's just, it's sometimes a little bit easier to kind of get a response when we have it
I'd rather
down.
talk.
The email address is nhc
Yep.
at nhmrc
Yep.
.gov.au.
You don't know anything about it, do you? It's really odd. It seems really strange to me, and I just need to get some clarity because I'm just trying to work some stuff out. Oh, thank you very much. I appreciate your time. Well, we didn't get a response today. Apparently somebody only works part-time. And apparently they're doing a lot of work on the NHMRC report right now, so who knows, might get something out of it yet. So let's do a new search in the 2007 NHMRC review. Phrase not found. Phrase not found. Phrase not found. Phrase not found. Again, not a single word. After running this test and seeing these results, I wrote to the NHMRC to confirm whether or not such studies had been conducted since 1991 and would the organisation care to comment on the matter. As you are now aware, the NHMRC's 2007 systematic review does not mention the word hypersensitivity, despite the US National Research Council's 2006 report calling for more studies into this area. But I wanted to be sure I was not missing something. In an email dated March 26, 2013, an NHMRC representative confirmed that the 1991 review, which recommended controlled sensitivity testing, has now been rescinded, and that this was followed by an unpublished edition in 1999. No comment was offered on the process or content involved in this review. The NHMRC representative drew attention to the organisation's published 2007 review, which considered, quote, the current available evidence base, unquote. If these studies don't exist beyond the many case reports published in the 1950s to 70s, why did NHMRC not move heaven and earth to have an Australian research facility do them with NHMRC government funding? We know that the NHMRC has all the power of government to get necessary research done or not be done as they see fit. All the fluoridation promoters have to do is make sure the available evidence does not include proper health studies, and the NHMRC will keep the only available studies. If somebody actually did the studies, the NHMRC would be able to look at them. If they want something done, they have all the power of government to get it done. If they want something left alone, they seem to have the power to make sure it's left alone. Given this, the $65,000 question becomes apparent. Regardless of the reasons why there's been no word from the NHMRC in 22 years about potential hypersensitivity to fluoridated water, does this really mean that no one in Australia is currently suffering from this condition? Or is it possible that there are genuine sufferers out there suffering serious symptoms from fluoridated water without even realising it? If NHMRC stated in 1991 that, quote, these claims are being made with sufficient frequency to justify well-designed studies, unquote, how would it be any different now? We were able to locate many such people in the course of researching for this film. The even bigger question, the million-dollar question, is why did the NHMRC completely disregard the entire 2006 US National Research Council report when they must have known that on page 303 of this report, hypersensitivity testing was called for, mirroring the NHMRC's own 1991 advice? With such a glaring oversight, how did the NHMRC still manage to make the following conclusion in 2007? Quote, there is no evidence of adverse health effects of water fluoridation at 1 part per million, unquote. Unless somebody actually looks for harm, then every future review will say nothing different. If you don't look, you won't find. Has the NHMRC been irresponsible in not researching or calling for further research of fluoridation's effect on the kidneys? After all, there's only a single mention of kidneys in the entire report. It seems the NHMRC imagines we are just a set of walking teeth only. According to Frank Parsons, the non-invasive testing techniques of iris chromatic photography and hair analysis collectively can be used to provide a unique toxicity evaluation. Generally, iridology can be considered controversial, however, chromatic photography is scientifically significant. Frank Parsons' unique methods of evaluation include a branch of iridology called chromatics that looks at the colours radiated from the alien pigments discolouring blue and dark eyes. In the same way that scientists studying a star's spectrum of light to work out its chemical makeup, chromatics use colours radiated by the iris to identify problematic alien pigments resulting from pharmaceutical product use and other toxic exposures. Chromatics looks at the alien pigments clinging in the fibres of the iris to provide a more comprehensive insight into a person's previous exposure to pharmaceutical toxics and the client's present health status. Additionally, Frank uses a precision hair analysis to diagnose. As hair grows, it dyes and freezes chemical components in the hair tissue. Samples are taken, an acidic digestive mix is added, the hair is broken down into a liquid, it is filtered to remove solids, then a precision instrument is used to analyse the liquid. According to Frank, organ damage impairing function can be the result of tissue damage caused by toxic elements. So 51 elements in the periodic table are determined during analysis, including all the common toxic elements likely to damage organs. The combined methodologies of iology and precision hair and skin analysis is constantly identifying pharmaceutical treatments as being the cause of many modern chronic diseases. Finally, a full patient pharmaceutical history is taken as to how a person may have gotten a disorder as a vertically integrated information gathering exercise. Marilyn's chromatic eye analysis showed she should have constitutionally blue eyes, but accumulated toxic exposures, shown as alien pigments, have made her eyes appear brown with a green tinge. The initial hair analysis showed the biochemical effects of previous toxic exposures with significantly high levels of potassium, sodium, barium, bismuth and chromium. Her hair was low in copper, cobalt, lithium and vanadium, which can be interpreted as her body being toxic in these elements. That is, low levels of toxic elements in the hair can indicate a high amount of accumulation and low elimination occurring.
Thankfully, Campbell Newman, as Premier of Queensland, rescinded the mandate, which should have never been there in the first place, in Queensland or Australia-wide, but now has handed that over to the councils to decide. Now, we've got some councils who have high integrity and honour and care for the people and their health, but we've got some councils, quite a number I would think, who are going to continue with this hazardous waste pollution of our water supplies and hence our food chain, known as fluoridation.
In 1973, the Victorian government passed through legislation the Victorian Fluoridation Act, which basically stops people from suing the government for any ill health side effects of the fluoride in the water. They've made this act so stitched up you cannot sue them, touch them or anything. But why are they doing that if it was so safe? It's not safe. And they know that, and that's why they've made this act, so we can't touch them. So what can you do? What can you do for all of us? I'm not the only sufferer out there. There are many, many others. Please write short, sharp letters to your local MP asking for fluoridation to be withdrawn from your water supply.
what would be the implications if the NHMRC of 1991 report recommendation was followed and the symptoms of susceptible people were shown to be reproducibly developed in well-designed scientific studies by the government's own health agencies?
Well, the ramifications would be that this would get a great deal of reporting in the scientific press and in the public media, and would become quite a scandal to know that the governments had this information from the NHMRC and had not ensured that proper testing was carried out right from 1991. When you think about it, it's now nearly, or in fact over 20 years later, the same people and a whole cohort of new people are still suffering these symptoms, and no testing to confirm their complaints has been done in this country.
So we have to get the people to pressure councils and just say, look, it's not on. It's as simple as that. It is not on. The people will not allow this chronic poisoning of our water and our food by fluoridation. The government upholds the NHMRC, the National Health and Medical Research Council, 1991 report as being the gold standard, but unfortunately they're not even following it themselves by not getting any testing done. Now, 1991.
In addition to that type of clinical testing, you would think that doctors should be able to send patients for blood or urine testing for fluoride. Well, in fact, workers in our fluoride-polluting industries, like smelting and oil refining, they can get urine testing. But no research centre in Australia has been funded to do the necessary work to develop protocols to make blood and urine testing for fluoride applicable to the general population. That is, to develop suitable and applicable testing relevant for the level and the types of fluoride exposure that occur in the general population. Now, I understand this is a complex biochemical area, but that is no excuse for the failure to tackle it. We know that there can be multiple explanations for a high fluoride reading in a blood or a urine sample, but for goodness sake, we've been exposing many Australians to constant fluoride through their drinking water for 40 or 50 years now. It is vital that the work be funded and proper monitoring be put in place. Monitoring both on a population-wide basis and clinical testing for affected individuals.
It is outdated, old-fashioned, and we are one of the last 3% in the whole world with fluoride in our water, making us sick.
Please, everyone, think about everything in this film and demand the Australian government end water fluoridation pollution forevermore, urgently.
David, how easy is it to actually stop the fluoridation program? I've heard reports in the news of late that it's 10 million or 50 million or even up to $150 million to stop the fluoridation program. Surely it's as simple as just turning off the tap, not buying the chemical and not putting it in the water. What are your thoughts?
Yes, it is that simple. Obviously, you just turn off the valve, stop the flow of fluoride, and then take your time to deconstruct the equipment. But it's only when you have shared water supplies between neighbouring municipalities, if they don't all agree on stopping at the same time, then one council might be forced into installing defluoridation equipment, and that is costly. But they should all stop at the same time.
As simple as that, to stop fluoridation.
As simple as that, yes, and it's time. In 2013, there's no reason it should be still going on. It's my opinion that it is a scientific disgrace and a public health disgrace that state and federal health departments are neglecting or even blocking this fluoride testing from happening.
We need a serious university-level public debate among qualified scientists with specialties in toxicology and environment to sort out fluoridation health issues as a matter of public policy and ethics. not just media hype and propaganda about caries, where people are encouraged to vote for their favourite belief system, and where even the mention of possible toxic accumulation of fluoride is merely brushed aside with breathtaking arrogance.
So, is it fair that I have to pay for something that I personally cannot have contact with?
To me, the bigger issue is that if you use industrial grade hexafluorosilicic acid, you're going to get arsenic, and that's a known carcinogen. You should not be putting that in the drinking water. So, that's my story. There's no comprehensive monitoring of fluoride levels in our bones, in our blood, or in our urine. At this point, we should have millions of data points. We have practically none.
Had no research into the carcinogenicity, toxicology of it, and it's not available, not available, not available, not available. Why? If you don't look, you don't find.
Has the Department of Health in Australia done testing on fluoride levels amongst mass populations?
No.
Why not?
Because if you don't look, you don't find. Again.
It's not being investigated in Australia.